At this time in Goss's Garage, we're going to talk to Lyndon Abell from Rommel Harley Davidson, and we're going to discuss winterizing your motorcycle. Yes, you winterize motorcycles.
I like to ride motorcycles personally, not winterize them.
Well, I understand that.
Now, if you're really far north, you can get fairly extreme with this, right? So people will pull their motorcycle down, perhaps drain it of gasoline, spray fogging oil into the cylinders and so forth. In our area, all of that stuff is really pretty extreme. The reality is you're going to have some nice days. You're probably going to want to ride it. But some people are, their bike is going to sit there for at least a couple of months, and you can take some, do some things that will prevent problems down the road if you address them proactively. And it doesn't mean that you can't go out and use your motorcycle.
Right.
But if you don't use it, it's protected instead of being a sort of, maybe not a ticking time bomb, but certainly deteriorating.
One of the critical things that I've found is fuel.
Absolutely. One of the worst mistakes that people make is they go for a ride in whatever, October, November, they come back, they've got a quarter tank of gas, and it then sits for a couple of months. So there's a lot of air in that gas tank, and the little bit of fuel that's in there oxidizes really quickly. So you never want to do that. I mean, in general, you want to keep your fuel as topped off as you possibly can, but if it's going to sit for a period of time, that's much more important, because if you have a full tank of gas, there's very little air in there to help oxidize the fuel, and it will last much longer. Now, if you know it's going to be sitting, use a fuel stabilizer, fuel conditioner, add it, fill the tank up so that distributes it, ride it a little bit to get it distributed into the lines and the rest of the fuel system before you let it sit, and that fuel will last much longer.
Well, the other thing with a full tank is, whether it's a steel or a plastic tank, either way, they form condensation on the inside of them. And the more of that metal you have exposed, the more condensation you get and the more water that builds up over time in the tank.
Well, that's true too, but I'd be just as worried about the tank itself. If with a motorcycle, it's typically a steel tank with a sealer on it, and that moisture in there will help promote corrosion of the tank or deterioration of the sealant. And that can be a pretty expensive proposition.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the other thing we have to be concerned with these days, because all of our fuel has ethanol in it.
Get gasoline.
Yeah. But ethanol it attracts moisture, it absorbs moisture, so we're getting a lot more moisture in the tank than we ever did before, so you need to use some type of isopropyl dry gas.
Yeah, so not just a stabilizer, but something that's going to work with the ethanol. I mean, if you can fill it up with 100% gas, that's great.
Yeah.
A really good routine, if you know your bike's going to sit for a little while, get it serviced. I think a lot of people think, well, I'm going to get it serviced in the spring so that it's ready for, the time that I'm riding the most. I understand that, but if you service it in the fall, it's still going to be ready to go in the spring. And while it's sitting around through the winter, you want to have fresh oil on those parts. Oil lubricates, everybody knows that. It also cleans, it also cools, but the other thing that it does is prevent corrosion. And oil that has been used for combustion for some period of time, or even the transmission lubricant that's been allowed to absorb condensation over a period of time, just doesn't prevent corrosion. In some cases, it's actually promoting corrosion. Getting rid of that contaminated oil and putting fresh fluid in there will allow your bike to be in much better shape come spring. So get it serviced. On your way home from getting it serviced, fill it up with the appropriate fuel conditioner, stabilizer. Take it home, clean it, give it a good cleaning, because it's always nicer to look in your garage and see a clean Harley Davidson. And then plug it into a battery tender. So not a charger, not a trickle charger, but an automatic battery tender that monitors the battery and keeps it at a full charge, monitors it, kicks in the charge when it needs to. And if you do that, your motorcycle will be ready to go when you want it to, but if it sits for a couple of months, it's going to be in much better shape. Another good idea on a car, this can be a bigger problem. It's easier to solve on a motorcycle. Either get the bike off the ground, which is hard for most people, or every few weeks just roll it back a little bit or forward a little bit so that it's not sitting on the same tire spot the whole time.
Okay, now I have one car that I don't use very much, so I use a battery tender on it as well. So, and it extends the life of the battery and
Absolutely.
all kinds of things. And my motorcycle is always plugged in.
Yeah, if you're not going to ride for a week or two, you should plug it in.
Yeah.
Some people just make it a habit that when they get off their bike, they plug it in. But
All right, so we want fresh oil. We want to clean it up. You want the paint protected with a good wax.
good coat of wax, absolutely.
And especially things, raw steel on some of the bolts and things like that. Make sure they're clean, I presume.
Absolutely. What happens with, I mean, it's not just having a pretty motorcycle, I joke about that, but dust and dirt acts really like a sponge and absorbs the moisture that's in the air, and then you've got that moisture that's just laying right on the metal, and it promotes corrosion. When things are nice and clean and then dry, and then you've got a protective coating on them in the case of paint, or chrome polish on the chrome, aluminum polish on the aluminum, that stuff is less of an issue, and you're going to have a bike that's not only good looking but going to last a lot longer.
Now, one other thing with Harleys, you now have liquid-cooled motors.
That's true.
What kind of maintenance do you recommend there?
Just like, you know, the standard maintenance, so follow the maintenance program that gets checked at service intervals and flushed and replaced when necessary.
Okay, proprietary coolant?
Oh, yes. You know, I think long gone are the days when coolant is coolant. Cooling systems are made with different materials, and you have to use the appropriate coolant for the vehicle.
Yeah, and
Whatever
regardless of what you see in the parts store where one size fits all, I mean, yeah, it'll keep things from freezing and so on, but will it protect all the different plastics and metals?
Yeah, I mean, if it's an emergency situation and you need some to get from point A to point B, and then you flush it and do the proper thing, I understand that. But don't go for the cheaper choice. Get the stuff it's supposed to have.
Normal tire pressure while it's in storage, or?
Well, some people like to increase the tire pressure. I think just regular tire pressure, because if you're going to go out for a ride, you want it to be set properly, and that's just easier to do. And frankly, it's easy on a motorcycle to just roll it back 6 inches, roll it back another 6 inches a few weeks later, then roll it forward a couple inches. You know, so you can move those tires around generally pretty easily with a motorcycle. It's not like a car. And for some people, if they have a lift, they like to get it up off the ground. I try to think of, you know, how somebody's going to use their bike. I mean, you want the advice to be easy enough for them to do, and have the bike ready to go when they want to use it, or they won't do it at all.
One of the things, I had an employee who had a motorcycle, and it was in storage for the winter, and he wanted to make sure the tires were protected. So every couple, 3 weeks, he would roll it back, and then he would roll it forward to where it was before.
Yeah, you want to change the distances a little bit. Well, I thought you were going to say he wanted to protect them, so he coated them with Armor All every couple of weeks.
Oh, no.
So don't do that.
No.
Please don't put Armor All on your motorcycle tires.
All this tire shine and stuff like that, get it on the...
There is actually a product for motorcycle tires that Harley makes that makes them look good without being slippery. But we've had several expensive repairs performed because somebody was trying to be extra good to their motorcycle and Armor All'd them up. One was a sort of sad, funny story about a guy whose kids cleaned his motorcycle, including Armor All'ing the tires for his Father's Day gift, and he proudly drove it out of the driveway while they were watching and landed in the street instantly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Happy Father's Day.
Kind of like walking on marbles.
Yeah, yeah. Fortunately, he wasn't hurt, but the motorcycle was kind of banged up. We fixed it, and I said, no more armor all.
All right, so this will make everything come spring or whenever you want to ride it. You're all set. You're ready to go.
I mean, if you ever want to take it out for a ride, if it hasn't been too long, literally just unplug the battery tender and go for a ride. If it's been a few months, you'll want to double check your tire pressure and set that and go for a ride. But, you know, we always get nice days in November, December, January, and even February. So, you know, if you're somebody that knows you're not going to use it, that's fine. Store it and you're done. But if you want to have the bike available, service it, fill it up, clean it, plug it in. You'll be ready to go.
Now, one last thing, and that is if the bike has to sit outside, a lot of people like to put a cover on them, and there are different types of covers, ones that breathe and ones that don't.
Yep.
And one of the worst things in the world you could do is take a blue tarp, plastic tarp, and put over the bike because it holds moisture.
That is correct. It's probably even worse in the summertime than in the wintertime. But I think well-meaning people are putting tarps over their bikes thinking that it's going to keep the rain off of it. And that's going to, prevent corrosion. But what it does is trap moisture underneath the tarp and, steam it like broccoli. And it's really terrible for the motorcycle. So yes, if it has to be outside, you need an appropriate cover. And you can get away with a different cover if it's outside but underneath the carport, for instance, than if it's completely outside. But spend the money, especially if it's outdoors, spend the money on the cover to get a really good quality cover.
Lyndon, thank you. How can we get in touch?
Website rommelhd.com or phone number 410-263-3345, or come on by the dealership at 30 Hudson Street in Annapolis, Maryland.
And if you have a question, a comment, or just want more information, goss-garage.com.